Good morning, Lagos. Thanks a lot for tuning in on this Democracy Day, June 12th, 2019. You're welcome to Freshly Pressed 91, part of Smooth Breakfast. I'm Ayo Mairo Ese.
And I'm Valentine Ohu.
It's time for us to look at some of our news headlines today in detail. And to join us for analysis on these stories, we have with us Lawan. Lawan, good morning.
Morning, Ayo.
How are you doing today?
I'm very well. This
Right.
is actually the third time you'll be seeing me in a t-shirt now.
Yes, it
Back
is.
to back week. We've had 3 Wednesdays that we've had public holidays now. I
Oh.
mean,
Mm-hmm.
it feels
That's
so
a good
great.
thing.
Doesn't
Yes.
support holidays.
All right. You heard his voice already.
Killjoy.
You heard his voice. Devoe is here with us. Devoe Okorie, good morning.
Good morning for all those that love holidays. We
Echo democracy.
Eku democracy, or as Fela would say, demon crazy.
All right. If you'd like to join the conversation this morning, you can do so via various social media portals. We're on WhatsApp.
WhatsApp number is 0809-444-0981. And on Twitter, we're at Smooth91FM. Use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. You can watch us live on YouTube and leave a message there too. We'll be glad to have you join us.
All right. Thank you very much. Our first story here, of course, made headlines, possibly in all the newspaper, in all the news dailies. Punch newspaper has this one: Buhari, APC, PDP react as Lawan, Gbajabiamila emerge National Assembly leaders. Now, the majority leader of the 8th Assembly, Ahmad Lawan, and his counterpart in the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, yesterday emerged as the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House, respectively. Now, the story goes on to tell us how they emerged winners. Both of them notably are from the All Progressives Congress, APC. Can you please take us through the story, Bolan?
Yes, this is the major highlight of this week, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been looking forward to who's going to be the Senate President and who's going to be the Speaker of the House. There's been a lot of controversy on the end of the Speaker of the House.
Yes.
I mean, there's been a lot of talk about fraud allegations that have been leveled against the Honorable Gbajabiamila, which has been going on for several weeks now. I mean, this has now come to an end now, and finally, a winner has emerged. Senator Lawan, who, when the election was conducted yesterday, came out with over 79 votes out of 107, so that was a landslide victory for him. Likewise, the same for Honorable Gbajabiamila as well, who also came out with a landslide victory by 281 votes casted for him, while the opposition had 76 votes. That is Bago from Niger State. He's also from the APC. So, I mean, this is a big difference from what the experience that we had in 2015, where it was shrouded in a lot of secrecy. There were a lot of scandals, people hiding behind the cars or so. And quite a lot of people did not partake in that election process at that point. But here we had now, this election process this time around was transmitted live on TV. We saw the votes being casted. We also saw that due process was followed. Although there were initial uproar in the House where there were demands by some of the Senate leaders for them to have an open cast ballot system. I mean, when we look at that, eventually that was overruled and the secret ballot was decided on, and the vote went on.
Yes.
This is a good move.
Okay.
We applaud this, but all that I just need to say is that it's a process, and this is not the event itself. I mean, we now know who our Senate President is and who the Speaker of the House is at the moment. What we now expect to see is a cordial relationship between the executives and the legislators, and this has to translate into good dividend of democracy for the people. We're expecting to see that. I mean, the budget will now be passed on time. We're expecting
Hopefully.
to see a lot of things happen, a lot of improvement in the lives of citizens going forward.
Are you positive? What are your expectations for the relationship going forward for the next 4 years? The relationship between the executive and the legislature. Do you see this positively affecting policy implementation?
Well, now that the president has ended up getting the people that they want in office, I am
Is that what you think?
Oh,
Well, we would like to be
we'll
positive
keep
anyway
watching.
that there will be progress.
Yes, we'll keep.
Let's
we'll
wait and
keep our
see.
eyes
We wait
on
and
it.
see.
Yes,
I
that's
don't expect much, because one thing we should know is that once the executive or the legislation are actually having full backing of the executive, that's not so much a good sign. We need to understand the reason why the legislators are there, and they're there for a reason to ensure that the interests of the people with enabling laws
Mhm.
would ensure that the executive do their work. Well, let's
But,
just
but it doesn't
Thank
mean
you
that they
very-
have to
all right.
contradict each other.
Thank you, Bolaun. Thanks a lot. Unfortunately, we have to move on to our next story. But if you'd like to see reactions from other parties and other members of the APC, you might read that article. PDP in particular said they will not sanction their lawmakers for voting against what their directive had said. But Guardian has this next story. Federal government promises to amend Cybercrime Act. So the federal government has vowed to pursue the amendment of the Cybercrime Act, which many lawyers, journalists, and activists have described as repressive, unconstitutional, and illegal. Devoe, can you please take us through this story?
Well, once again, I think Sarah was in the lead here, and they were speaking to a body, a session, an interactive media session on the constitutionality and legality of the Cybercrime Act in Nigeria. Now, if you look at the words that they've described it with, they've said in a collective memoranda that comprising lawyers, journalists, and activists, that the Nigeria Cybercrime Act was repressive, oppressive, and unconstitutional. Those were strong words.
Yes.
Simply because recently there had been, since the act was signed, there had been some harassment and disrespect of fundamental freedoms given to citizens, journalists, bloggers, etc. along the way. Now, they had realized that it was defective in some regards, and that to that extent they'll need to do some amendments, reviews, and some form of memorandum to actually get this to where it should be. Now, the director of SERAP had said that whilst many of these people have faced threats and harassment, of which we know a few of, they're simply trying to say that if we must regulate properly.
Yes.
Sometimes it seems as if that the government is simply just out there to shut down people who are freely expressing themselves. No, that should not be the position, and neither should the laws give them the ability to either harass, intimidate, or even arrest anyone unduly. Now, they've called on the Attorney General to prioritize this and this liberty to speak. Remember, this is about the freedom of speech here,
Yes.
not about cyber crimes in terms of advanced fraud and financial crimes. And what they've said is that the Constitution should guide, and it does supersede any other law. So that should be the guiding point, because the Cybercrime Act currently is vague in its interpretation. And I like to commend them for this, because there are many laws. Remember, most of our laws are very vague in one instance or the other,
Yes.
to the extent that most times we have to go through many court
to
cases
interpret
just to
it,
find
yes.
out an interpretation on it. And going into the future, we actually need Nigeria to grow in tandem with global best practices.
Yes.
So while technology is in use, people should understand the extent of their liberties,
Yes.
to be able to speak, express their views, and the biggest thing that's hardly spoken about, you are allowed to disagree. Criticism is not a crime. We've kind of created
Shouldn't be a
this
crime.
notion that, if you speak against a constituted authority, if you speak against constituted authority, you face some form of threat or intimidation. No, it shouldn't
Yes.
be that way.
And,
you should feel bold to be able to speak
Right.
without any fear.
And the ability to be able to afford certain tools, laptops, phones, however
Right.
expensive, shouldn't be regarded as a crime,
As a
or
crime.
frowned upon.
All right. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'll come back to you for the next one from the New Telegraph. Buhari insists on unconditional return of looted funds abroad. Last week it was big in the news. It was a hashtag Abacha loot last week, and the Channel Island Jersey, in to be specific, had said that they will look at how much or how they will repatriate our money back to us.
The Abacha
Sovereign Wealth Fund. Now, President Muhammadu Buhari has said that his administration will no longer settle for conditional repatriation of looted funds, public funds stashed abroad. He said this while strengthening his renewed commitment to the FCC and other anti-graft agencies. So he's talking tough, but how possible is this?
Well, maybe when he meets the president of the United States of America next, he will look him eye to eye and then tell him that, look, all those funds need to be repatriated back. Because, I mean, this sounds like sound bites to me. And the reason why I said this sounds like sound bite to me is that when we look at the previous incidents, this Abacha loot that we're talking about, Nigeria was not even involved in the repatriation or confiscating this money that was in Jersey as at that point in time. Anyway, the president mentioned this at a National Democracy Day Anti-Corruption Summit, which was organized by the EFCC. And he once more reinstated his commitment towards the promise that he made in his 2019 campaign, where he talked about the focal points that we'll be looking at is the area of security, economic improvement, and the fight against corruption.
Yes.
And when we're talking about the fight against corruption, of course, we're talking about the repatriation of all these monies that have been taken away from the country. And he also went further to talk about the processes that are being put in place. He's talking about the commitment towards strengthening the EFCC and other anti-corruption agencies. As at the moment, he was talking about an inter-agency relationship between the Presidential Advisory Committee and against corruption and anti-corruption agencies, and also the EFCC, where they're coming up with new measures to fight corruption. And part of those measures that we're talking about now is closing of existing legislative loopholes, is also talking about educating and mobilizing and encouraging Nigerians to also speak against corruption.
Let's talk about that just for the next 30 seconds. I saw an advert yesterday on CNN, and it was privately sponsored or sponsored by a not-for-profit, talking about advanced free forward. It was a good advert at grassroots level. How well do you think the FCC and other anti-graft agencies, how well do you think they're doing with community mobilization to report incidences of fraud or corruption in their area?
Well, the only progress that they've made so far is in the area of the whistleblowing aspect, but as far as sensitizing the citizens, they haven't actually done enough. They need to do a lot more sensitization, a lot more engagement, because fighting corruption, it's everybody's responsibilities.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Devoe, let me come to you, but before then, we'll take some comments from WhatsApp.
All right, MI from Akoka sent this one. It said the ruling party have successfully bound the ghost of 2015. Hopefully, there are no more excuses from the executive, and Nigeria will be turned into Wakanda over the next 4 years. Eku June 12. Thank you, MI. Shogun says there was acrimony and chaos in the last assembly. It did not move this nation forward. Hope there will be harmony and progress in this assembly. Why some people wanted more conflict between the House and executive, I will never know. Ooma Chidozie sent in this next message from Yanapaja. It says, Nigeria will experience a more inefficient lawmaking process and body. Meanwhile, Buhari now has his way in terms of persons he preferred, but I'm optimistic that his 9th National Assembly will be very abysmal in performance. Time will bring this fact to people's doorstep.
We're so cynical.
For your message.
All right, thanks a lot. Let's move on to this story, Devoe. NAPTIP director cautions Nigerians on visa lottery. This one, I'm sure a lot of people's ears are perked up. When you hear visa, get interested. So the Director of Intelligence and Public Enlightenment of the National Agency for Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, Okorie Arinze, has called on Nigerians to shun investing in visa lottery, saying they are scams. He made the call, at a training at an international conference on illegal migration. I don't know if anyone has seen the movie Joy. It's been viral and talking about just the realities of people going abroad in search of a better life, and for some people being trafficked against their will. How do you think this will play out? Do you think all visa lotteries are scam? Do you think the government should be focused on improving the economy so that people do not find, moving abroad as attractive as it currently is?
Well, that is an utopian dream. However, you see, this campaign by NAPTIP, remember, they stand to fight the human trafficking crimes going on within the country.
Yes.
And one of the avenues for that has been these scam visa lotteries. And here he was speaking to a youth body, professional bodies, I think that was in Abuja, and they were insisting that this campaign to curb the patronage for most of these lotteries, and many of them come communicated to you via the internet or text messages, etc., or even notices that people swindle around. And they were saying that these things were not real, that none of them exist, and that the main propaganda here that they intend to use was to sensitize people, okay?
Yes.
As well as educate them. Now, their aim was not to arrest them, because how many do you arrest? Because these scams use all manner of channels to get to people. Now, in the sensitization, they've been going around talking to different groups, strengthening stakeholder communication and all of that. Now, as regards education, obviously, how do you make abroad less attractive? Well, it's not so much of less attractive. Their own position is that if they educate Nigerians, if Nigerian youth are educated, they might see some wholesome activity to indulge and engage in locally. Or if they must travel, they must travel the right manner, but not thinking that there's one freebie or one open
Land flowing with milk and
one
honey.
miracle floating in the air that they could get easy. Now, what do most of these visa lotteries promise? First of all, they said there's no American lottery stopped long ago. There's no Canadian visa lottery, and that they lure them through these cheap and easy ways, and telling them that most of the bars that are raised to filter people out, that they wouldn't have those issues. Now, the truth is this, right? This is an issue of social economic welfare. And at the end of the day, what makes abroad more attractive is because more people are facing a lot of desolation and hardship as against an economic or social economic aspiration that their country can make it work. Now, this is Democracy Day, June 12th. There's a reason for the fight. We've just spoken about how the National Assembly has been elected.
Yes.
What was the real interest at play? What is the agenda of our politicians, of our leaders? What is actually the real fight for the people? Are we fighting so that we might be elected to get our hands in the cookie jar? Or are we really fighting because we want better governance? We want better opportunities within our own land, so that we can live and grow here happily, successfully. This is a real cocoa in this matter, and hopefully we will join NAPTIP to ensure that we can promote for a better society.
I like that you use that as a closing statement, Devoe, because it's very instructive for us to ask the right questions, especially questioning the legislature for what the cause that they're fighting for. Is it about more allowances for them, severance packages, or are their interests really on the primary reason why they are there, the people? Which links us to the next story, because it's about socio-economic development, right? And FinTech Experts, a group of FinTech experts, they call themselves African Financial Technology experts and entrepreneurs, they've come together and identified Nigeria's inability to retain her best talents as one of the major contributors to social economic challenges that Nigeria faces. Well, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this stems from what Devoe was just talking about when we're talking about developing our own country to ensure that a lot of our citizens stay in the country. I mean, this was stated by the African Financial Technology experts who had a 2019 IE African Center Forum. And amongst those, there were quite a few people that attended this forum. Part of it was people from Sahel Capital, from several other banks as well. These are all fintechs people. And their complaint was mainly about retaining labor and retaining people that had the technical abilities to improve the lots of our environment in this country. The report is that we have a lot of fintech experts leaving our shores regularly. I mean, this is not new to Nigeria, and it's not only peculiar to this industry. Quite a few months ago, we reported how we had a lot of brain drain, doctors leaving the shores of Nigeria.
And it did not start now.
And it didn't actually start now. It's something that has been going on for several years. So the government needs to do a lot in asking several questions. Why are people leaving the shores of this country?
But to be honest, we've been asking so many questions. We know the answer. Now it's about action. Let's be real. In our society, what's the major factor that encourages people to travel abroad or even to relocate? Well, it's because one of them, lack of social safety nets.
Yes.
The system seems to be broken. How do we fix this?
Well, just as you said, lack of social safety nets. We're talking about security. We're also talking about a standard of living in the country too. How do we fix it? Just what we've talked about. Now we've appointed our Speaker of the House. We've also elected our Senate President as well. So we're hoping that there's going to be harmony between the government agent, between the different arms of government now to ensure that the lives of the citizens get better. So we're expecting a lot from the Ninth Assembly. We're expecting a lot from this second term of President Muhammadu Buhari to fix a lot of all this.
All right, still talking elections, petitions now, still in the news from the New Telegraph, Devoe. The Independent National Electoral Commission, President Muhammadu Buhari, through his council, legal counsel of the All Progressives Congress, they're all speaking almost in one voice, asking the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal that's sitting in Abuja to dismiss the petition that's filed by the presidential candidates of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar. One of the petitions really is asking, or majorly asking, that the election be declared null and void, and that's the last presidential election that was organized. But the council is faulting his claims, saying that, I mean, one of the reasons he gave was that they failed to include the vice president, amongst other things. How do you see this whole story?
I'm gonna take this story with a pinch of salt because you see, it looks like a charade at this point. And this is the election tribunal we're referring to. This election tribunal was supposed to review all the issues and the cases that were contending the outcome of the elections that we just passed through. Now, out of the all the petitions, about 11 were filed. Now, APC and INEC withdrew all of theirs, while the petitioners, that's the other petitioners, that's a PDP, that's speaking for Atiku Abubakar, still had theirs there. Now, of the two that they're meant to read tomorrow, they contain the ones of the Atiku claiming that with the PDP that the INEC server was compromised, and that the one in B, and that they want to inspect the server, and once they inspect it, the results that they get, they want to publish. Now, while the PDP with Atiku published about 6, INEC petitioned about 4, which they withdrew, and then Buhari APC published about 3, which they also withdrew. Now, the article just goes through and explains how they were knocking down the PDP's position that, first of all, there was no server, that the votes were counted manually, that it's bound to fail, that there's nothing that they should be given to them, and that it bears no merit, that they didn't include Osibanjo's name, etc. That it sounds silly at this point, but the truth is this, right? There is an integrity that is required of the election tribunal. Now, we're not questioning them. What we're hoping is that the opposition, which is Atiku and PDP, have a sound case. Because at the end of the day, what you want is a case whereby Nigerians begin to realize that if there is some form of grievance with the election process, that they can get fair and square justice at the end of the day. It shouldn't be a game where we come around and we play ball. All manner of seriousness should be given to it, because we're looking at stabilization. Because after a certain point, tribunals have been given deadlines to be able to conclude and come out with outcomes. And whatever the outcome is, stays, so that we can move on with the newly elected democratic leaders.
All right. Thank you very much, Devoe, for your analysis. Linking it to this next story, well, not linking it because they're not related, but this is something...
An earlier one.
Yes, an earlier story. So apparently, drama is playing out. Some students have been detained for 4 months in Oka prisons, along with one lecturer. 6 students were affected of Madonna University in Okija. They were detained since February over an opinion they posted on Facebook challenging this university authority. Well, they said the post simply read, "Good lecturers are scarce. Madonna University administration should be nice to our lecturers, or a good number of them will resign." That was, in a sense, regarded as a crime, and they were allegedly arraigned in court yesterday. Your thoughts on this, Devoe?
Well, you have to give it to Sarah. This is part of what we were discussing in terms of regulations with the cyber crime regulation. Although this was not on behalf of the government, this was on behalf of the school authorities who charged 6 of their students because of a post that they made. Now, I mean, on the surface, when you look at it, obviously they're chiding the school authorities to be nice to the lecturers. One would wonder what was the real issue. However, should that be a reason for being charged? Now, the court did not sit. NANS also came.
That's the Nigerian Association of Nigerian Students.
Yes, they came around to support the students with the protest, of which many parents, those who had the children who were arrested, were claiming that they have reached out 11 times to the school proprietor, but he had failed to more or less release their children.
Mm.
Now, Nance was saying that in their petition that the school authority was obviously being high-handed, that they arrested some of them, claiming that they were criminals, cultists, and fraudsters, that they know that they are not kidnappers, fraudsters, or cultists. However, they intend to investigate the matter, that we are not in a tyrannical or dictatorship rule where we practice a totalitarian system. The masses must have a voice. Students are intellectuals and must be able to voice out their feelings even when things are not going well. And I think this is just a simple case in a larger country. There are many cases like this. It seems as if where people have authority, they seem to wield it, especially when, like I mentioned, there is a liberty and a freedom to express your perspective, your view. You're also allowed to disagree. Disagreement is not a crime.
Yes, because that's where my question lies now. You don't use a hammer or a sledgehammer to kill a fly. But now the size of the fly is the question right now. Because
they committed no crime.
I mean, how do you know? Like, that's why I'm asking, how grievous is their crime?
If we go by the story, what they posted obviously was directed to the school management.
Questioning.
Yes. Now, they didn't even question. They simply advocated, be nice to our lecturers, whatever that meant. However, is that expression criminal? It is not.
All right.
A lot of these things are issues of morality or issues of stance and do not merit a charge.
So let me ask you again with regards to our, our law, our court systems and the prisons. One of the parents had said his son had been in prison since the 19th of February, and I wonder if there was no option or opportunity for bail, and why he had been held in custody since the 19th of February. Like you mentioned, when people who are in authority, positions of authority, sometimes they're able to wield certain influences. So why should this student have been in custody since the 19th of February?
Well, that you're speaking to the larger gaps in our judicial system, and I hope that not only the civil society bodies, but even the Ministry of Education is also looking at this, where private institutions wield influential power on their students without giving them a voice. Remember, being a student does not remove you or does not remove your rights when you still have a voice. You can speak at any point in time. And if at all the school authorities did not like what they said, I'm sure there were means and other alternative means to constitutionally address the matter.
All right, thank you, Devoe. Adeni sent in a message on WhatsApp, say, hi guys, I do not understand the situation where opponents come up with accounts of crimes allegedly previously committed by a fellow contending candidate, and later it dies down like it never occurred. Former Governor Ambode came up with an accusation against Sanwo-Olu, and Gbajabiamila was also accused of some crimes he allegedly committed in the United States. Does this mean these people didn't commit the crimes or the offenses, or we just decided to overlook their offenses? Do the offenses hold water in Nigeria because they were committed outside of the shores of the country? Kindly shed more light on this.
They're members of the APC.
I don't know.
Their sins
it can be any party, but simply in politics, you can taint or condition the minds of those who would vote. That is just a tactic. So,
but if for instance, yesterday we were talking about the Onogan story and the fact that the president had accepted his resignation, and we asked the question that about the allegations that were made against him before. So, does it disappear? Is it still going to be prosecuted?
Who takes up the prosecution? Someone has to. So if everybody drops it,
all right.
Sleeping dog's life. That still has the big question mark on consequences in Nigeria. Now, Vanguard newspaper, just to mention this in a few seconds, Buhari's second term, one of the big three credit rating agencies, Fitch, has said that affirmed Nigeria's rating at B+, which is not quite high, as well, relatively though. It says it's a stable outlook, also saying that President Muhammadu Buhari's second term will be marked with implementation of piecemeal reforms and slow progress. Your thoughts?
Well, this is just a mere report card from Fitch, just talking about the outlook for Nigeria's economy, and they don't see much for over the next 1 or 2 years. They're talking about the GDP being, the projections will be about 2.2, but they're also expecting to see an increase in our debt to GDP ratio. Currently, our debt to GDP ratio is probably about 20% or so, but it's gradually on the increase now. So we're going to be looking at about 28% now. Right. We're also talking about the deficit as well, too. Of course, the budget deficit, which is going to be rising. So Not a lot of positives, really, according to Fitch. But that's where they
Per
see.
capita income becomes low.
Thank you. Mike here says why most people go out of the country is because our currency value is low, no jobs, too many taxes, no infrastructure. Good morning.
Taxes?
Thank you, Mike.
All right, Olatibosun says, had it been the basic necessities of life are not far-fetched here in Nigeria, then there wouldn't be go slow from Nigeria airspace to America and European airspace. But it's unfortunate that the pack of leaders we have are seen as greedy and self-centered. Even the newly elected leaders in the National Assembly have skeletons in their respective cupboards, allegedly, if you like. Iron Valentine. Anyway, I hope they will serve Nigerians and not their selfish interests. Thanks, Olatibosun, for that comment, and thank you to our analysts, Lawan and Mr. Gquest on Twitter, and of course Devoe at Devoe okorie.
Happy Democracy Day, and let's remember the tenets of democracy itself. It's not about the holidays, but
Thank you very much indeed. Let's reflect on that as we sit in our homes and we have a day off. All right, Lagos, we are not having a day off here on Smooth 98.1. We're here all day, every day. And next up, it is Tega with the locker room here on Smooth Breakfast. Good morning.